I'm just about to admit to everyone. John, are you ready?
As much as I'll ever be, I suppose.
All right, here we go.
I think we've got 4 o'clock on the button, judging by the news. Karthik, have you let our customers and prospect customers into the meeting?
Yes, I have, and there's
Great.
more joining, so yeah.
Super. We'll just give everyone a minute or so to get on this Friday wet afternoon. Let's give another minute. I'll start telling a joke here now, but we haven't had your beers yet, Matt. So we'll give it a minute. Maybe I'll tell a joke at the end, maybe depending on the power of your beers. So welcome for those who are just joining. So we'll just give it another minute or so. I think it's filling up nicely. So welcome to those just recently on. Okay, I'll just give it another 30 seconds, starting in about a minute one. So we're okay. Cool. I think we'll start actually, because for those of you who've kindly got on bang on time and haven't had the team's run over of meetings, welcome to Friday. Welcome to Demystify Microsoft Defender. For those who haven't attended in the past, or haven't been on one of these webinars, one of these beer tasting webinars, but please look at our website for past webinars we've done around process and access controls, data governance and ransomware, how security works with Office 365, closely linked to this one, I suppose, and immutable backup are all recent webinars we've done, but please check out our website for more details. So thank you first off for giving up your Friday, well, the last bit of your Friday. Hopefully it's been a good day for you, and hopefully we'll set you on the way for the weekend as well. So with me today, I've got Karthik and Matt. And Karthik, for those who haven't worked with Karthik, has 22 years of experience in the IT industry, with over 15 years consulting on Microsoft technologies, and obviously he's going to share with us today around Defender. Before he joined us, he worked at a large, one of the largest sovereign wealth funds, where he was the architect and system owner for M365. So lots of experience around the compliance and operations side. So Karthik, welcome. We really look forward to you demystifying Defender for us. And also we have, welcome, Karthik. We also have Matt. So for those who have also been maybe more regular webinar joiners, and especially on these events, Matt, welcome as well.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Matt. And Matt's gonna, if you like, demystify beer making, I suppose, a bit later. So we look forward to that. But Matt, it's a beer tasting event. Could you kick us off? Which ones of these? And hopefully everyone got their beer delivery. But Matt, which one should we start with?
Yeah, I think probably a good start is Soundwave. So it's the purple can right there. Soundwave is our best-selling beer. It's the first IPA that we ever brewed back in 2013 when we started, and it essentially is as much of a brand itself as Siren is. So I think that's a great start. For those of you familiar with craft beer, you'll be quite familiar with the style. It's kind of a classic, fruity, American style IPA. I can obviously tell you a little bit more about how we brew it and who we are towards, after the presentation. But yeah, enjoy this one, and I'll tell you more about it very soon.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt. Again, for those joins, any questions you have, please use the question button. And these are questions for Karthik, for myself, or probably more likely for Matt. So Matt, keep an eye on the questions for us as well. So also for those that don't know BlueSource, and hopefully you've checked the website, but if you don't, so we design, deliver, and manage kind of cloud infrastructures that are designed to align to your business objectives. That's our cloud transformation business. We've our modern workplace, whereby really trying to help you empower your teams to work collaboratively, efficiently, and securely, and in this new hybrid way of working, where I'm sure many of you are working from home, and also in optimizing and maximizing that Microsoft investment. But it's all underpinned by what we're going to talk about today in one particular area, is that security and governance part of our practice. Again, if you haven't worked with us in the security side, please do for a start. But we follow the framework, the NIST framework, cybersecurity framework, and we do that because we've got an awful lot of American type vendors that we work with. But we also use the NCSE and the CIS frameworks in the UK for best practice and controls when we're working. So that's a bit about that, and that's why hopefully the identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover is where we try and have these conversations. And of course, today we're going to talk a bit about all of these, but in particular for us, when we talk about identify, we're really meaning, and we're going to talk a bit about that at the end, about current state assessments, dark data, what data do you know about, where are you on that journey to the cloud and modern workplace as well, and where are the potential gaps. There's a lot of technologies being deployed very quickly, such as Teams. What's the gaps there? What's the user access? Who's doing what? We help you identify where you are on that journey, and we help you identify maybe some of the gaps as well, if you haven't already done that. The protect side is exactly what it is. It's that data loss protection. It's that cloud email. I want to read the screen there for you. Detect is probably one of the fastest growing parts of if you like, the stack for us as well. And that's really, looking at unusual activities on your network or by your staff. And we're seeing the current network firewalls are struggling to cope with this cloud, this move to the cloud, and also they're struggling with that detecting maybe Dropbox shares to OneDrive, stuff like that as well. So we use Netscope really closely for that, and we use, on the endpoint side, we use a lot of CrowdStrike, but today is focused on Netscope as well. That respond, we've a few organizations now that actually we're on retainers for. So an event, the unfortunate event that we've that help is needed, we're able to respond 24/7 for those types of P1s. And of course, the recovery, we've been doing backup as a service for many years now. But we're also seeing that shared responsibility on should we call it, on the cloud side. So our SaaS data restores are becoming key for that part as well. You're responsible for your data. Microsoft is responsible for the application. So we're seeing a fair growth in our SaaS type business when we're moving organizations to the modern workplace, all underpinning that cloud movement as well. So lots we do, lots maybe you don't know we do, but anything around that security and helping you in that journey, wherever you are in that journey, I think we can certainly do that. So without further ado, Karthik, I'm going to pass over to you, and for those we haven't got a seamless, I'd rather Karthik kind of run his deck. So Karthik, I'll let you share your screen now.
Right, perfect. Thank you, John.
Matt, it's a nice beer as well, by the way, actually. So yeah, not sure how long it'll last, but over to you, Karthik.
All right, great. So hopefully everyone can see my slide.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to start with just talking about how cyber attacks are becoming, so much more cheaper and more sophisticated all the time. And from this slide deck here, we can see that decided to jump ahead, but here we go. So we can see that that ransomware attacks can be launched for almost no cost, really, and compromised credentials can be bought, in lots of 1,000 for less than $1. So the potential for attacks are increasing dramatically. The sophistication of attacks are increasing dramatically. So if we look at what's keeping CISOs and other sort of security leaders and industry leaders up at night, it's primarily the security of cloud resources. That's the top priority. And without having proper layered security controls, so the defense in depth strategies, breaches can often take months or longer to discover. And most sophisticated attackers will wait until they can cause the most damage. Breaches, as we know, can also be very, very expensive. We know this from personal experience, having worked with and are continuing to work with a number of organizations to help them recover from such attacks, by helping them harden their security postures going forward, helping them move workloads to secure clouds, etc. And if we look at, right, if we look at Microsoft's approach to the security, their focus is on using AI, machine learning, behavioral analytics to detect anonymous signals. Don't twist. As much, much.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Have you been drinking already?
Yeah, yeah, that's the effect of the beer. Much faster than humans can, and also having the ability to then automatically respond to these variety of threats based on all these detection alerts and taking action very quickly. Finally, of course, having a robust set of tools that can provide the telemetry needed for the detect and respond capabilities, plus, of course, providing that protection and the hardening at the endpoint, cloud, or appliance level. And if we look at the way that Microsoft achieves this, the kind of heart of the service, if you wish, is the intelligent security graph. Now, this is the brains of the operation, and it's where over 8 trillion signals from across many of the world's largest corporations to small businesses are analyzed, there's threats assessed, and the responses coordinated. This information is filtered through to specialist teams within Microsoft that focus on different areas, from malware protection to digital crimes. And they continually use all of this data to develop mitigations against new threats, to protect our identities, our data services, and our endpoints. Now, these are the defenders in the Microsoft security stack, and we'll cover these today. However, I just want to point out, and it's important to note, that these products don't represent the entirety of the Microsoft security stack. There are quite a few capabilities and services that fall under the compliance umbrella, which also contribute towards the security posture. These are products such as Microsoft Information Protection, MIP DLP, as well as endpoint protection, endpoint DLP. And these tools, so the Defender tools are there to protect the devices, the infrastructure, the environment, the apps, and so on. These other compliance tools help protect the actual data and help identify that sensitive data and protect that sensitive data, but they all work together. So let's run through what each of these defenders do very quickly. So the first one at the top, we've got 365 Defender. Now that is a unified pre- and post-breach enterprise defense suite that's accessed and configured through Microsoft 365. Defender for Office 365 and I know the names are very similar, but it is different from Microsoft 365 Defender. Office 365 Defender is actually a subset, and it's based on, and it's a cloud-based email filtering service that builds on top of the core protections offered by Exchange Online Protection. Then we've got Defender for Endpoint, and this provides next-gen antivirus and threat and vulnerability management, not just on Windows, but now across macOS, iOS, Android, and Linux as well. Defender for Identity is a cloud-based solution that leverages your on-premises AD signals and behavioral analytics to identify compromised identities and potentially malicious insider actions. Next, we've got Defender for Cloud Apps. Now, this is Microsoft's CASB solution, and it can provide visibility and control over data travel. It has sophisticated analytics to identify and combat cyber threats across multiple Microsoft services, but also third-party cloud services. Defender for Cloud, I'm going to cover that in just a second. So Defender for Cloud, I wanted to kind of highlight and have a separate slide because it's really important. So Defender for Cloud is a security posture management tool, or a cloud security posture management tool, and also a threat protection tool. It strengthens the security posture of your cloud resources, protects workloads in Azure, but also hybrid environments through Azure Arc. And now, just 2 weeks ago, Microsoft made a new announcement that Defender for Cloud is now able to also provide those posture recommendations, cloud security posture recommendations across AWS and GCP. So this is amazing for organizations that are following a multi-cloud strategy, because using this tool, they have a single pane of glass across their entire cloud estate, whether it's on Azure and Microsoft or 365 or across AWS and GCP. And hopefully they'll extend that to other clouds such as IBM Cloud, etc. in the future. But right now it is available and live for AWS and GCP in addition to Azure. And then finally, we've got Microsoft Defender for IoT. I think this is a little bit of an unloved sibling, but the really great importance of Defender for IoT is that it helps secure and manage enterprise IoT devices such as conferencing systems and VoIP phones and printers, etc., which are often unmanaged and unpatched and sort of, they're out of the way, not really thought of in a security context, but they can be really easy targets for malicious actors to get onto your environment. Okay, now all of these products can be consolidated under 2 main suites. And this is how they stack up. So you've got Microsoft 365 Defender, and you've got Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And so when you combine these, it gives you this amazing, great XDR capabilities. And unlike other vendors with point solutions, the Microsoft security stack has been designed to talk to each other, share telemetry and signals with each other, and actually become more capable when they are used together. So looking at the licensing, the 365 Defender licensing is available across a range of different plans. So if you've got licenses for any one of these, I'm not going to read all of them, but if you've got a license for any one of these, then you actually get the ability to use Microsoft 365 Defender. Now, it's important to note that the last one, you notice that you've got Defender for Office 365 Plan 2, and that's because there are 2 plans. So there's a Plan 1 and a Plan 2. The Plan 1 is available as an add-on for E3 users. Now, most of these plans you will see are primarily for E5, or they are included with E5. But there are you do have the ability to buy them standalone, and you can buy them as add-ons. And it's always a good idea to speak to your licensing partner, or speak to us, and we can kind of help them pick the right kinds of products and work out the best licensing deal for you, because it's Microsoft licensing and there is a lot of complexity in it. But generally, as you can see, it can be quite simple. If you've got any of these licenses, you are eligible to use that product. And in some cases, you have plan 1s and plan 2s. And typically, the plan 1s are to help people and organizations who are on E3 get at least some level of these advanced protections. And then the most advanced protections and kind of the full suite of capabilities are available with the E5 licenses. All right. And I also just want to call out, so Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, because it works across such a wide variety of endpoints, so right from PCs to, as we looked at Mac OS, and to servers, so Windows Server and Linux as well. There are, again, some differences in how those are licensed. So Microsoft has introduced a new P1 plan for Defender for endpoints. And the P1 plan is basically to help organizations with E3 licenses get the advantages of having Defender on across these multiple operating systems. And the P1 plan is targeted primarily at sort of the client endpoint devices rather than servers. So if you want to protect servers, you have to go for the P2 plan. And there's some other complexities on how exactly you would license servers. So again, as I said, definitely speak to your licensing partner or speak to us, and we can help your licensing partner understand what the best options are. Okay. And I would just want to cover a couple of examples where we've rolled out these different capabilities. So in this case, we were approached by a global consultancy who were using another antivirus product and other threat detection products, but they were keen to understand more about the Defender stack and if the Microsoft products could actually replace some of their other solutions. So the first thing we did for them was have a workshop where we could talk about Defender for Endpoint as well as Microsoft 365 Defender, and how they should be configured, what the best practices and benefits were, and what the new capabilities they could potentially get. We then prepared and agreed on a deployment approach and a plan, incorporating all of their requirements and also deeply involving their security and IT personnel, as was their request, because they wanted us to help with the knowledge transfer as part of project delivery. The project was, of course, delivered very successfully, with the client now getting much, much richer telemetry from across their PC endpoints, their on-premises servers, and their cloud servers, all going into a single portal. And we've also helped them configure ASR and automated remediation in place, giving them a much stronger security posture and greater visibility and ability to detect and respond to new threats. The next example I have is with a financial services startup that approached us again to help them build a completely modern workplace environment, cloud only. And here, so what we did was, of course, being very secure, as they're going to be working in financial services space and servicing clients and managing client data, etc., on their environments and financial data and so on. So what we provisioned was a really security hardened Microsoft 365 environment, which they could use to do all of their work, but also maintain all of these client records, and that in combination with an Azure environment where they're actually going to have their software services, and all in a really, really secure environment. we configured all of the workloads under the security stack that we've seen so far, plus the other ones that I mentioned under the compliance stack. So we did things like configure 365 Defender for them, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365, identity protection, multi-factor authentication, conditional access so they could manage their internal resources, but also their external contractors and vendors and counterparties and so on in a secure way, give them access to just the data that they needed to get access to. We configured Defender for cloud apps, of course, so they could monitor all of this telemetry across the various SaaS services that they were using. And we implemented Microsoft Information Protection with DLP protection as well on their endpoint devices. And so we can see, the results kind of speak for themselves. They've been live using the system now for several months. They've had 0 threats coming through to their managed SOC. We've got 0 phishing exploits, ransomware, or malware attempts that have been able to break through into their environment. 0 data exfiltration events. So everything's being blocked right at the device level or at the service level, and nothing's actually breached their environment. And they've had 0 threats across all of their PCs and servers. And they've now actually come to us to ask if we can extend the protections onto macOS devices that they're going to be introducing to do development of their iOS version of the app that they're planning to launch. And all of the applications on their devices are managed and patched through Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So again, giving them this really great security posture, not only giving them a great security posture, but allowing most of these things to happen automated, so it doesn't put any extra burden on their internal resources. All right, and then as we can see from the latest kind of Forrester report that was released in Q4 of this year, we see that it places Microsoft in the leaders wave as an XDR provider. So the Microsoft toolset has come about in leaps and bounds, and we are, have been able to deliver really secure environments, protect our customers, and help them get the best visibility and protections against the growing threats in the marketplace.
Thank you, Karthik. A bit of feedback. Brilliant. Thank you, Karthik.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Karthik. If we put you on mute, Karthik, I seem to be getting some feedback from someone. Cool. Okay, it's gone. Brilliant. Thank you. Actually, this is Microsoft a multi-vendor. We decided to change the slides just before we started, so I'm left with this one actually. But before I do, because this is definitely one to talk about over a beer, Matt, what would be your next selection of the, because that soundwave was really nice actually, so I was sipping away on it. But what would you recommend now before
so I would recommend this green and yellow one here. This is a beer called Granadilla, should I say. It's a 4.8% fruity pale ale, brewed with a granadilla fruit from South Africa. So similar to a passion fruit, really kind of fresh and zingy. A little bit lighter than the last one, but lots of flavour. And I think, yeah, it's a slightly taller can, so I think this will last through your presentation, John.
Oh, I'm not going to be talking that long, but okay, good. Thank you, Matt. So I might crack that open now in a second when I finish this one actually. So this is we get asked this a lot actually. Microsoft are a multi-vendor. Most organizations we speak to, and it's the one conversation, is it E3 or E5? E3, it usually tells us when we come into an organization that you're moving to Office 365, maybe M365, but do you trust the Microsoft story, because a couple of years ago you probably wouldn't have trusted, putting all your eggs in one basket with Microsoft. Now they've made some leaps and bounds. Hopefully you've seen some of that from Karthik's presentation just now. But what we're seeing is a lot of organizations looking at, should they go to E5, and the security part is the big question for that. Is there enough? Because it is not the cheapest of technologies at that level, but again, you get a lot of value there. What we are seeing is a lot of organizations moving towards CrowdStrike. For the likes of CrowdStrike, we work closely with CrowdStrike, we work closely with Netscope, we work closely with Mimecast. And what's becoming interesting in the market, not so much to compete, because they will all tell you, every one of these third-party vendors will tell you they work really closely with Microsoft, and they do. But they're also integrating as well. They're spending a lot of time, effort, and energy showing, and for instance, the DLP function that you would get within, say, CrowdStrike is you're able then to use the same DLP policy within Netscope or within Mimecast, for instance. So we're seeing a lot of, should we call it, third-party vendors really come up, get speaking to each other. A lot of information is shared as well between those vendors. And again, so I think from a price point, from a best of breed, we've got some great, we know these technologies, so we'd be delighted to help you and pass on some of that information, or work with you on trying to understand what's the best route for you. So so look, we're never going to solve that question, but it's certainly one to have over a beer or in a meeting. But we are seeing, I think it really comes down to, if you're invested in E5, then we've got to work out how do we maximize that investment, and that's what we're really good at doing. But if you're thinking about it, then we can also help there as well, or show you what the rest of the market is doing, because you're not like that startup where it's a greenfield site. You can nicely deploy. Probably everyone on this call has got technologies that have got a date and a renewal date, and so therefore taking anything out, using budget, you need to make sure you've got the correct plan there. So part of our security posture is just to see and understand that, and we can help map out, because this isn't something you do tomorrow. This is something that you'll do over the course of a year, 18 months as well. And the other thing we're seeing is that's helping organizations that are looking at not just about reputation and security, it's actually the costs. As I said, E5 is an expensive tool, but we're seeing organizations now where their cyber insurance is absolutely skyrocketing. So they're looking at how do they make those savings, how do they reduce what they have. So that's sometimes about your data, reducing the amount of data you have, understanding what that data is as well. So lots of questions, lots of parts of that question. Hopefully you're enjoying your AGA, whichever this green one is, Matt. Karthik, do you want to move on to the next slide? This is the selling bit, so hopefully you've had a couple of beers now, and we will end up, just telling you what we do. Karthik, do you want to just move on the slide? Thank you. So look, we talked about that security posture assessment. Great way of helping people understand how they're going to move to the cloud. What does that look like? What's the gaps? And also review what you've done in the past, what technologies have been deployed, what's the gaps in those technologies potentially as well. So hopefully a lot of this assessment will cover that as well. So I think that's the last slide, is it, Karthik? Okay, yeah, a bit about the report. I mentioned it at the start. We use the best practices from the NCSE and the CIS. And again, look, we can share the types of reports we can build if you're of interest on that side, to really help you on that journey. Because as I said, it is a journey, and sometimes there's some points you can do, and having a correct plan in place that isn't delivered tomorrow, but is delivered over a period of time. But but the security, as we all know, through ransomware, through whatever kind of malicious individuals and organizations and states are out there, it's certainly one that is top of most of the organizations we speak to's mindset as well. So same as yourself. So we'll take some questions if you've got any. Hopefully they're about beer, they're about Microsoft, whatever they are. please drop them on the chat, or just drop them on the chat, and we'll try and answer them as we go. But Matt, I'm gonna so Karthik, thank you again, and Matt. So I'm about to crack open this beer now. As I said, guys, if any questions you have, please put them up on please put them up on the chat. But Matt, coming up to Christmas now, any of the beers that you've told us about, are there some bestsellers there? Are there some key ones there? What's going on in the world of brewing at the moment?
We actually, I'm just double checking to make sure, but yes, there is actually one that you've all received in your box. I wasn't going to suggest opening it in this session purely because it's 7.4%. I thought that might be a little bit punchy for 4:30 in the afternoon. But it's part of our Caribbean chocolate cake range of beers, which are a set of 4 beers that we release every Christmas. Super indulgent, chocolatey, rich beers. So, and that's definitely one to maybe have later on this evening or tomorrow night. It's almost a dessert beer in itself. So if you fancy a dessert and a beer at the same time, then we've got you covered there, really. But yeah, that's our biggest launch that we do. Originally, it was a collaboration with a brewery from Florida. It was so popular that it's turned into its own kind of mini series. So what you've got is the original, which was the one that kind of started it all. But the other 3 in the set are a white pancake chocolate stout, a Death by, so imperial version of it, and a Mexican mole version with spices. So almost imitating like a proper spiced hot chocolate with chilies. So really interesting beers, but they sell out pretty quickly every year. They're always gone by Christmas. So, but other than that, we just brew lots of different beers all throughout the year. Really beers that we enjoy brewing, really, I guess.
This green one, the one you just told us. That one. I'm cooking monkfish tonight. I don't know if anyone's ever cooked it before. Rick Stein, he does a tamarind and like a Madras tamarind is his favorite fish curry, but it's monkfish. This would go lovely with that, actually.
I mean, food, beer and food pairing is really subject, and it's something that I'm always trying to learn more about, because really it is a journey in itself, and everyone is slightly different. Everyone's got different palates. Everyone tastes differently, more susceptible to bitterness and what have you. So there is really no right or wrong, and it's just trying things out. But I think as a general rule, I think something like this, the kind of the fruitiness, fruit and spice go very well together as a general rule. So I think this would go quite well, especially as I've not had a monkfish curry before, but it sounds like it's quite a light kind of curry with lots of flavour, as opposed to
I hope so.
We'll see how it goes. Opposed to like a rich kind of spicy like meaty curry, which I think would probably dominate this beer. But I think it would with the fish curry, I think you're probably onto a winner there. So if you can save a little bit to try it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to happen. And then with the the brewing process, what's the technology of beer? We've talked a bit about technology on from the working, the modern workplace and that side. Tell us a bit about the technology of beer. Is that obviously everyone's been brewing beer for I hear thousands of years. How's that changing, and what are you guys doing there?
Yeah, I mean the kind of the history of beer is really interesting. I mean, there's recipes that go as far back as the Egyptians for beer, inverted commas, because obviously it's changed a lot since then. With a few kind of, I say, recent technologies or discoveries. I mean, hops in beer we're always used to talk about. We all know that hops are in beer, but that's fairly new. We've only been brewing with hops for about 300 years. In the grand scheme of things, when you go as far back as Egyptians, that's not long. Up until that point as well, there was only 3 ingredients in beer because there was no understanding of what yeast was and did. So again, these are all fairly recent developments in that sense, but for us, Siren, there's been quite a few kind of technological developments fairly recently, actually. We crowdfunded back in 2018 mainly to purchase a canning line. The market is definitely leaning towards, beer in cans. There's lots of benefits to it, not just for the beer, but for the environment as well. So they're pretty expensive. So we had to, get some funding in. Our canning line actually cost us just around about £800,000. We managed to raise 1.4 million. So we've used that kind of the rest to essentially invest in new technologies. Probably the most exciting part of bit of technology we've got is our water treatment plant, which allows us to essentially recreate water profiles from anywhere from around the world, so that we can brew maybe a traditional Pils or a German Helles lager or something like that. So, stripping water back to its bare components and then using, treatments to get it to where you want it, which is really exciting.
Are you going to recreate your new Guinness with Liffey water? Is that what you're telling me now? I got to keep an eye out for that.
I mean, yeah, the theory is that we could do that, absolutely, and because water plays a huge part in beer, especially the profile of it and how it drinks, and that is exactly why Guinness tastes better when it's brewed at the actual Guinness factory as opposed to all over the world. It is a thing. It's not just a rumor. That is a thing. Dark beers. London is very well known for its porters and its stouts. These beers were invented there for a good reason, because the water's very hard. Some of the best IPAs that you can get in the UK are from places like Wales and Cornwall, because they've got soft, lush water. So it's definitely, it's definitely a thing, and it's really exciting that we can actually manipulate our water, kind of in that sense. But if you actually went to our brewery, it's semi-automated, so everything's controlled from a touch screen, from the brew deck. You can transfer beer from vessel to vessel, open closed valve. So that actually allows the brewer to think about what's best for the beer. It takes away maybe a certain kind of romance in the physicality of brewing, I guess, but less time really doing the physical parts, and more time to think about what's best for the beer. How we're gonna, especially if there's some problems and you need to problem solve, because brewing is mainly problem solving, I guess. But understanding more and more about the ingredients, especially the yeast and how it behaves. It's a live product at the end of the day, and it will do what it wants to do, but we can control it now thanks to technology.
And Matt, you mentioned about cans, and I think I might have mentioned it before in another webinar. Why has cans become? Because I remember, it was always the when you had cans of lager, they were just kind of the worst. You got the kind of can taste. What's gone on with the technology on the cans then that's coming back in, and actually the beers doesn't seem to be affected by it?
Yeah, I mean, so probably the main technology is, in each can there will be a lining. Obviously, because you want to protect the beer, you don't really want it touching the can, you don't want it touching the metal. We're able to create these that are non-toxic, and they're not harmful to the environment. So we're able to create cans that do that. But of course, we're talking about metal here that recycles forever. Glass, yes, you can recycle it, but it's very kind of water intensive. It's very resource intensive to recycle. It's a lot lighter. So straight away, when you're transporting beer, you're talking, less weight, so less fuel that's being used. You can stack it. You can store it better. Lots and lots and lots of benefits really to the environment, and also to the end user as well. Light is really bad for beer. If you were to buy 2 bottles of beer and put one on the windowsill and put one in a dark cupboard, and then in a month's time drink them both, the one that had been on the windowsill would taste awful. it really attacks the hops and just stresses out kind of the yeast and causes all kinds of off flavors. Of course, with the can, it's not letting any light in whatsoever. So lots of benefits really, and this is amongst a host of other reasons why the market is shifting to canning, and we're all able to do it efficiently and have the beer taste good and not spoil. So yes, I think bottles probably were best, and we do still bottle beer when we barrel age beer. We've got a barrel store and a good barrel aging program. All those beers are bottled because there is some intention for it to, for you to lay it down in a cellar and age it at home, and that is best done in a bottle. But for beer, absolutely cans definitely is the way forward. And even from a business perspective, we've got a bigger canvas for our artwork. We've got all the legalities on the back for shipping all over the world, because obviously everyone has different requirements. So there's a lot more room for us to play with on a can. So it's from every perspective, including marketing, it's a lot better.
And you mentioned about water then. The quality of the water is the next part of the Siren story to get into, I don't know, gin or whiskey. Whiskey's a tough one, but it's all about the water with particularly whiskey. I do like a whiskey myself, mine. But is that the next? Now you've invested in the water. Is it's all about the water?
I think for us, and we pose these questions for our founder Darren quite often, and he always comes up with a good reason why he won't get into distilling, and I always kind of forget why it was. And it was actually quite recently when they announced that they were stopping production of Cafe Patron, and we posed the question, why don't we buy it and carry it on, which is obviously a bit of a pipe dream, but we were very sad to think it's a bit of an office favourite, and it's a bit it's in craft beer as well, everyone kind of loves it, but it's not something that we would kind of get involved in. We like working with spirits in terms of using X barrels to age our beers, but in terms of actually producing them, I think for us the sole focus will always be beer and just making the best beer that we can. To not lose focus on that goal, I think is key for us. But that water quality, because that's the way you make the best. Whatever you're making, that's you talk about the curry you're cooking tonight, John. Get the best, freshest monkfish, and the best spices you can, and it will be the best curry. But you buy the cheapest ingredients you possibly can, and you skimp and save here and there. It's just not going to be as good. So, and that goes for beer. And in all aspects of it, the best quality yeast that we can possibly use, and water and hops and all the freshest ingredients.
I'm sure there's someone better on the call might come up with an analogy there with what we've just been talking about, having the best of technology or whatever. So yeah, I'm sure there's one there. So if anyone does, please put it on the on the chats, because there's lots of ingredients in securing yourself as well, or securing your environment. So and this is unrehearsed, by the way, just in case someone thinks it is. This is I won't say the beer talking, but the brewery talking. Matt, you mentioned a beer there, Cafe Patron. What's that? What?
So Cafe Patron is actually it's a I think it's a tequila.
Okay.
Tequila. It's actually produced by one of the big players, I believe, maybe AB InBev. I'm not entirely sure, but they announced that they were stopping production of it, and I think it struck a chord in the craft beer industry because we naturally drink a lot of beer at work, so every now and then, sometimes when we go out, it's beer's not always on the menu, but the shockwaves through the craft beer community. Because good example of a quality product, really.
I think a couple of people have just joined. Again, if you've got your beers, that's the one we're on now at the moment. So Matt, yep, brilliant.
Yeah, John. John, I'll just make take the mics. I think everyone's stuck; they can't talk. So I'll just allow the mics for attendees.
Brilliant,
and if anyone wants to sort of just informally ask a question, no problem. But in the meantime, Matt, I was talking to a pretty big drinks distiller last night, and that around their security issues, and they were quite interesting because they talked about how they were concerned about loss of let's call it ingredient data and recipes. Is that something that you guys worry about?
Do you know what? That's an interesting question, because it's quite surprisingly the answer's not terribly, because actually we quite regularly share our recipes, and that's something that I think is very unique in craft beer. So I mean, this is a good example. This beer, Granadilla. This is a collaboration with a brewery called the A-Gear Project from Cape Town. It was a beer that we brewed with them as part of a series of beers that we brewed for the rugby for the recent Lions tour. And the reason that we brew collaborations really is that we get to work with other breweries and see how they work, and see what works for them, what techniques they're using, ingredients, and it's to share information. And this happens a lot in craft beer. And if we were to buy a new piece of kit and we weren't super confident using it, we quite often we'd call up another brewery and hey, you've used this before, what are your thoughts? And I think that is quite unique in craft beer. And in fact, if we had any kind of budding home brewers on this chat and there was a beer here that they really enjoyed, we would quite happily send them the recipe. And I think the reason for that is that the more people that know about good beer and the more good beer that's out there, the better it is for the industry. Essentially what happened with beer is that we lost the art. Lots of different reasons, but starting with kind of different influences, governmental influences. Prohibition was a good example. Everyone stopped making alcohol. You stop making it, recipes don't get passed down, techniques, and then you go straight into a couple of the World War I and World War II, where you can't get hold of ingredients, and so all of a sudden you grow up with generations and generations of people who just don't know how to do it. And I think actually what we're doing by sharing knowledge is trying to preserve that as much as we possibly can, and kind of keep it going. So I think in distilling it's probably completely different, but in craft beer it's all about sharing information as opposed to kind of protecting it.
Cool. And Matt, you just mentioned World War I, World War II. I presume are you going back to historical recipes and maybe bringing back, I won't say bringing back mead or something like that, but is there any plans to, or maybe some of the beers you already brewed are old, should we call it ye old world recipes? Absolutely.
I mean, the craft beer revolution, as we know it, actually started in the 1980s. So people talk about, and I'll have conversations with people, oh, it's popular all of a sudden, isn't it? Well, actually, this craft beer boom started in the 1980s in the US. And it really started because, and you'll forgive me because I forget the chap's name, but it was a US senator who actually repealed an old law that stemmed back from prohibition that prohibited homebrewing. You weren't allowed to homebrew. This was repealed, and then all of a sudden you had lots of people that could brew. We're now allowed to brew stuff at home and experiment and have some fun. But there was no records, really. The only really written records that there were English written records and recipes of beer, that people could get their hands on. So they started looking at the recipes from the UK. And that's what spurred on the craft beer movement, and I think pale ales, IPAs are all great examples, porters and stouts, all recipes, all beers that were brewed first and kind of, I guess, invented in the UK, that we lost the art of brewing, that the Americans kind of, reimagined. So, it's kind of influences like that. And you can look at lots of these kind of, political and bets, but I think in my mind, and obviously there's a lot of different reasons that people talk about, but I think it's probably quite accepted that when you grow up with generations of people that forget, or the make do and mends generation, coupled with it's hard to get your hands on ingredients, coupled with laws that prohibit things. And then also, an idea of, cheap is better. You kind of lose the art. And what actually we're coming out of that now. And I think that's another, market trend as well that's definitely helped us. Is that there were people now that would rather have 3 or 4 nice beers, pay slightly more for them, than have 5 or 6 cheap beers, and not enjoy them as much. And I think that's not just in beer. I don't think. I think that's everywhere. You'd rather go out for one nice meal a month than one average meal a week. And I think that a lot of people can probably relate to that. And I think that's definitely what's helping us as an industry, really.
If anyone has a question, please jump in, or I think there's a button there where you can put your hand up. So I'd certainly don't. I'd rather have audience participation as well. No problem there. So please get involved. Matt, just so people, Friday night, maybe what time is it now? We're coming up to 5 o'clock. So some of the other beers that have landed on doorsteps over the last couple of days. Is there ones, can you walk us through those? Maybe just give us an idea. Maybe if you're having, I don't know, takeaway pizza tonight or something. What would these go with, or give us some idea of what these beers are?
Of course. So I mean, within the box, so we've had Soundwave, which we've enjoyed. I think that's probably a great beer for like a kind of a medium curry or something that's got medium spice, maybe a Moroccan dish. I think it could hold up to it. IPA does elevate the spice somewhat, so you do need to be careful of that. But I think also it's quite robust, and it's got kind of the tropical flavors that would complement it. You got measure twice, cut once. I think that's quite easy going. That's probably a beer for you really probably to just enjoy while you're cooking. Nice, light, easy going, similar to Grenadilla, although I think your suggestion of pairing it with the monkfish curry sounds pretty good. We've got Enter Simcoe, which is a very hoppy beer. Again, probably a beer for you to enjoy on your own, maybe with some snacks, some nuts or something like that. It's a very hoppy, very kind of intense beer. Quite hard to pair with, I think, sometimes. One that's going to be really interesting, which is one in All In, which is a red IPA. This is a classic. This is the idea of the Americans reimagining like classic British styles. You'll be able to see when if you were to open that one tonight, you can always see the British influence and smell the influence and taste it. But you also can you feel and taste the American influence, that real kind of hoppy fruitiness. I think that would probably go quite nicely with the steak. A red beer with some red meat or some lamb, something that's got kind of punches packs a bit of punch. And then you've got the Caribbean chocolate cake, which I mentioned earlier, which I think probably is just a dessert on its own, but also would pair quite nicely with dessert, with some chocolate cake, with some tiramisu or something like that.
Cool. Actually, good question for Martin. Is it possible to visit your brewery? I know you've got a bar, I think, beside it, but
yeah, absolutely. So we're based in Finch Hampstead, which is just outside of Reading. So you can 100% come and see us. We run brewery tours on Saturday, so you can book on to do a tour. We do have a small bar attached to the brewery as well, so that's the place to go to to buy some cans or to drink a couple of beers. It's as fresh as it possibly gets there. The beers are made in the brewery and sent straight to the cellar and hooked up to a tap, so you can't get any fresher than that. And then actually just 10 minutes down the road, we've just bought our first pub, a lovely little country pub called the George and Dragon in Swallowfield. Pairing really nice kind of classic British food with some of our great beers, and we actually have beer on cask as well there. So if you're into cask beer, you can try some of our beer on cask. So yeah, you can pop down absolutely and visit us, and we're always pretty buzzing with people on a Saturday, and lots of tours and having a lot of fun. So it's a great place to be.
Cool. Whereabouts? I know you, just for those.
So yeah, Finch Hampstead. So it's just outside of Reading. It's about 10-15 minutes outside of Reading. It is in a little town. There is actually a brewery right next to us as well called Elusive. So we can actually see each other from our office windows. So they're open on a Saturday as well. So you could always do a little brewery crawl, I guess, in that sense, and visit us and visit them. They're a lot smaller than us. That's just almost like it's just a 3-person operation. But they make some really, really good beers, award-winning, kind of more traditional beers. So yeah, really, really good fun to come and flip-flop between us and them. But yeah, I'd encourage everyone to come down, especially to do a brewery tour. These are great. We actually love doing these, and they connect people easily from all over the world. But we'll tour you around the brewery. You can try a beer that's literally just been canned. So it's a good experience.
Cool. We're coming to the top of the hour. We kind of put these in for an hour. If there's any questions in the next couple of minutes, please do let us know. And as I said, if there's ways of helping you, either how do I call it, get better on your security or get better on your drinking, we'll help on both counts, and we'll use you Matt, to support that, I suppose. Matt, from a point of view of the beers left on there, anything you're brewing that we should keep an eye out for the next session? Is there any, who comes up with the ideas? I know it sounds like you've got a fairly team that everyone, very kind of collaborative, you work collaboratively, probably that way, but are there any kind of stuff coming down we should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I mean, influences come from all kinds of crazy places in terms of our beers. I mean, last year we brewed brewed a beer to drink like a cocktail for Christmas, which was a Key Royale style IPA. So taking that idea of having maybe a Christmas cocktail and offering up a beer substitute, which is really good fun. But all kinds of crazy places. We're definitely we're definitely in a stout kind of season. What you'll see quite seasonal trends in drinking. So as the weather gets colder, you're drinking probably stronger, darker beers. So you'll see a lot of kind of really interesting kind of stout porter beers coming out. Some barrel aged beers, which are fantastic. So I mentioned we have about 400 barrels in our barrel store, ranging from, I mean, these are all first use, so they've been filled with cognac, sauternes, bourbon, rye, Scotch whiskey, red wine, white wine, anything you can think of. Once they're emptied, we get our hands on them and we fill them with beer to draw those flavors out into beer and then blend them to make some super interesting styles. And we've got a really interesting dark cherry sour that's been aging in bourbon and port barrels for 36 months and then blended and bottled to give us really kind of intense, almost fortified wine, with lots of fruit. So really interesting beers. But I think this time of year it's all about the flavor forward, just like Christmas, really decadent, punchy, and all about treating yourself, really. So so absolutely keep an eye on our website. But also, I mean, the other thing to say is that we'll probably all spot all over the country. There's going to be some fantastic local breweries close to everyone here. So I'd also encourage not only to buy our beers, but find your local brewery and see what delights they've got, because I think there's over 2,500 small independent breweries in the UK at the moment. So there's probably one not that far from you and you don't even realise. So definitely search them out, because you can get some super interesting beers.
Yeah, brilliant. I think we're Smokehouse or Smokies is near us. So yeah, no, brilliant. Cool. I think we're at the end. A couple of minutes over. So everyone, Matt, thank you. It's always good to speak.
Thank you, John.
The new year we can do something else, and Karthik, really appreciate your involvement today and walking us through Defender as well. So guys, let's have a safe weekend, unless there's any last comments from anyone. Good. Everyone have a safe weekend, a good weekend as we lead up to Christmas, and if we don't speak, have a great Christmas. Thank you, Matt. We'll speak soon.
Cheers, John. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.